Landlords and real estate developers in St. Paul, Minnesota are trying to tell a federal judge that the new rent control law put in place in the city is unconstitutional. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it's going over the fight that landlords and real estate developers within the city of St. Paul, Minnesota are having against the city's new rent control law. Now, I told you about this law a little while ago, and basically it is one of the worst rent control laws in the entire country. The reason is simple, okay? One, it excludes no one. No landlords are excluded, no matter how small your property or how large your property. And the second thing is that it limits rent increases to 3%, no matter what inflation is, no matter what your costs are, no matter if your property is brand new or if it's 100 years old, you're stuck with a 3% maximum rent increase, right? And so this ties the hands of landlords all over the city. And you know what happened when they passed this law? 80% of all new development just immediately was canceled. Okay, the developers were like, hey, we can't make money, so we're done. And a lot of landlords, they just immediately got out of the business. They were like, you know what, I can't deal with this nonsense, and I'm not going to deal with it, so we're quitting. So now this case has made it all the way up to the federal courts, and they are arguing that this is just unconstitutional. It's not right, and this shouldn't be allowed to pass. And I agree with that, okay? I don't think that this is proper. I don't think this is lawful, and hopefully they get this thing thrown out, because you know what, it is going to kill development within the city. Now, I know that they have passed a few limited exceptions within the city for the rent control law recently, but I don't think it's enough. I think the whole law needs to be tossed, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you think the federal courts are actually going to, get rid of this law, or do you think that the people in St. Paul, Minnesota are just going to have to deal with the nonsense that goes along with rent control? Personally, I don't know. We'll see. I don't know how liberal the courts are up there, but we're going to find out. So anyway, this article is coming from the Star Tribune, and this is behind a paywall. So I was able to fortunately copy the text from the article onto just a text form. So I'm just going to get straight into it and read what I was able to copy. So, after hearing more than 2 hours of arguments Monday for and against St. Paul's rent control law, a judge is considering whether the policy is unconstitutional, as a pair of landlords claim in a federal lawsuit. Attorneys representing two apartment building owners have asked U.S. District Judge Nancy Brazel to stop the city from enforcing its ordinance, which places a 3% limit on annual rent increases at residential properties, with some exceptions. St. Paul's law is the first rent control policy in the Midwest. Voters approved the ordinance in the fall of 2021, and it took effect last May. In a complaint filed against the city in June, attorneys for Woodstone Limited Partnership and the Lofts at Farmers Market, LLC, argued the law violates the business's constitutional due process, contractual, and property rights. The St. Paul City Council, Mayor Melvin Carter, and Angie Wise, Director of the Department of Safety and Inspections, also were named as defendants. Yeah, and I think they have a good case, honestly, right? So my hope is that, they look and they say, hey, you know what, they're taking away our contractual and our property rights, and we just have to get rid of this, because this it's not lawful, okay? When a landlord, they create a contract and they say, hey, we're going to increase your rents by 5%, the tenant agrees to that amount, right? And you know what? Now the city's stepping in and saying, no, the city is the one who sets the rents, not the landlord, okay? The city is the one who determines how much your expenses are going to be, not the landlord. So somehow the city magically knows if your costs go up and whether you need to increase rents or not. See, the people who put these laws in place, they don't take into consideration that everyone's expenses are different. Every single landlord is going to have different expenses. Me, as a small house, I might own a small house, and then the house right next door might be owned by another landlord, right? But my house, doesn't have a whole ton of deferred maintenance on it, while the landlord next to me, their house might. So, when there's problems and something breaks, they have to fix all that stuff. I don't. Okay? So, that's why some of the expenses are more for one landlord compared to the other. Well, I might have, high efficiency appliances. The utilities might be cheaper in my building, whereas the utilities cost more in there. So that's why they charge a little bit higher rent. Okay? And, on and on and on. My insurance cost might be lower. My building might be valued higher. And so therefore I pay higher property taxes than the one right next to me that looks almost identical. So they can't take into the consideration that, hey, sometimes landlords need to be able to raise the rents. We have different expenses than each other, and the government can't come in there and say, oh, well, landlords only need this rent increase because we think that they don't have more expense. Shut up, okay? That is idiocy. In the months that followed the vote, the council substantially amended the law to exempt new housing construction and affordable units from the rent cap. Joseph Anthony, an attorney for the plaintiffs, argued that these changes force certain landlords alone to bear public burdens, which in all fairness and justice should be borne by the public as a whole. They added conditions which made it arbitrary and discriminatory and still didn't come up with a plan that addressed the needs they say they need to address, Anthony said. He listed a loss of property value and inability to do short-term leases among the harms his clients allegedly suffered due to rent control. Yeah, and he's absolutely right. Now, just talking on the terms of fairness, right? I don't think that rent control is fair to anybody. But if we're putting a rent control law into place, but you're exempting, certain buildings because, they said that they were exempting new construction and affordable units from the cap. So affordable units can raise the rent and then make the housing unaffordable, I guess? I don't understand the logic, okay? But I don't understand much of the logic of rent control at all, because if you look at the history of rent control in the cities where it's been implemented, it has been a resounding failure. That's why the most expensive places to live in the entire country are places that have rent control policies. Meanwhile, places that have never had rent control, many of them are very affordable. Why is that? That's an interesting fact. Anyway, in response, Assistant City Attorney Megan Hafner argued that there is a long legal precedent for finding price control laws constitutional. The majority of what the plaintiffs make are arguments about policy and about whether rent control is effective or not. Those are opinions, Hafner said. They are asking the court to act as a super legislator and pick and choose what's appropriate for the city, and that's not for this court to do. See, first, they make the mistake that they think, whether rent control laws are effective or not is an opinion. No, it's a fact, okay? Just because you're unwilling to look at the statistics, just because you're unwilling to look at every single place where rent control has been implemented and how it has been a failure, doesn't mean that it's not a fact, okay? And then you say there that, you're arguing over... if the city can, you know what? Here is my problem, okay? Where does it end? Where do government price controls end? You start off with something like rent control, right? Then you decide, you know what? Maybe food is too expensive. Eggs are super expensive right now. Maybe the government comes in and just says, no, you can't charge this much for eggs. Eggs need to be $1 again, right? Well, what happens to all the people who, are selling the eggs? They go bankrupt, okay? They go bankrupt because they can't make money selling eggs anymore. So what do? They get out of the egg business. And when they get out of the egg business, that means there's a shortage of eggs. And then when there's a shortage of eggs, guess what happens? Prices go up. That's right. So by the government stepping in and putting a price control into place, it actually creates less affordable of whatever they put that control on. So if they don't understand these economics, and they're never going to understand them because they are, living in fantasy land, then I don't want them to be, making any sort of decision about how I operate my business. So yeah, let me skip down a little bit in this article because let's see here. It says, Landlords successfully challenged another St. Paul policy aimed at protecting tenants in federal court in 2021 when a law passed by the city council to limit background screening of potential renters was deemed unconstitutional. City leaders did not appeal the district court ruling despite urgings from tenant advocates to do so. So yeah, landlords have won before. They won just 2 years ago back in 2021, and they could win on this one, and I hope that they do.